anybody who's taken a class with me knows that I tend to go long. In any case, this has been just a wonderful event this morning, beginning with Allison Schnabel's talk. I was listening to it and thinking, well, gee, I should just take the video and use it for one of my classes, or maybe the semester-long class. Because essentially what she encapsulates is what I try to instruct in the class. And speaking of that, I think what she was struggling with at the end is, after all the negative, how do you sort of impute people to continue with humanitarian development? And that's something I have struggled also. Many of you are familiar with SLO, student learning objectives, right? Well, in the old days, we didn't have really a tight format, so oftentimes we could just sort of dribble on a little bit. And one of the ones that Allie encountered in her class on Global Humanitarian Examined was this. And I think it sort of is a good sort of shaping for the comments that I'd like to make. The intent of the seminar is to leave students aware of the pitfalls associated with the history of humanitarian aid, but resolute in their determination to improve the world wisely. And though I think maybe it could be improved upon, that's sort of what drives me in my attempts to teach global service and global humanitarianism, and I think will be the informing sort of theme of my comments. There's all sorts of wonderful themes coursing through all 5 talks. We could go on at enormous length. But certainly, I think the first 3 talks really framed it in terms of where do you start? How do you interact? Do you have an idea and come in with the money from outside and go about doing the mission? Or do you listen? In some ways, I think both Katie's and Michelle's discussions, and in fact Lars's discussions, were sort of along the line of Diane Coffey's agenda there. It is necessary to dig deep into a culture, to listen to what they're saying, to understand some of the issues that are enormously important to them, and then to assist them in that notion of accompaniment. And maybe that's the segue. The notion of accompaniment is very, very interesting. Maybe you don't know this, but I was on a committee at the Division for Global Mission in the ELCA when we wrote the statement on the accompaniment, along with Bishops Raphael Malpica, Will Hertzfeld, Bonnie Jensen, and Winston Prashad. And while we were sort of aware that Farmer was coming up with this, I think the real sort of impetus was liberation theology, as you spoke about. Winston Prashad, Raphael Malpica were from Latin America, and they came with this sort of infection that says we really need to look at the relationship. And I think for future, if you want to pursue this agenda a little bit further, what would be interesting is to focus on what really dominated our conversation, which had to do with money and power. And the role of accompaniment was really focused on, well, what does it mean to walk along the road to Emmaus together? When we're brother and sister together. When one happens to be richer and one maybe a little less rich, but maybe richer in the spiritual realm. How can we combine that? How do we sort of disaggregate the notion of money meaning power in this relationship? And I think that is enormously important, not only for the notion of accompaniment, but in terms of both, well, almost all of your talks about trying to figure out this transcendent space, maybe I'm mixing metaphors, innovative space and lateral transcendence. But because I think what you're all sort of trying to understand is, how do we go about it? How do we sort of humiliate ourselves, or humble ourselves is maybe a better choice of words, to allow ourselves to listen to those who are speaking to us without sort of pejorative, almost colonial notion that we're bringing something to you. And I think that is very, very worthwhile in looking at. I think Michelle's analysis of one family allows us to understand essentially what bedevils a father, a mother, and 9 children on a daily basis. There is a whole array of issues. Michelle spoke about 2, education and money. Again, trying to figure out how money, the great facilitator, Gord Zimmel, talks about that, how that can be sort of shaped to, I don't know, to better empower those who need it most. Caitlin's sets up a wonderful framework in terms of trying to figure out where religiosity is and its connection to the social justice. Those are issues that need to be probed and continue to need to be probed. The analysis of world vision, right on, smack on. I think what I would like to see you maybe pushing into is a little bit more the analysis of world vision as an NGO that has evolved over time. It has been around for a long time, made a lot of mistakes, and yet sort of tried to rectify a lot of those mistakes to continue to sort of push for best practices. And the best practices in terms of humanitarian aid are forever changing. They're evolving. A new analysts come along and say, no, we really have to look at those. And I think a lot of these organizations are doing that. So I encourage you very much to go in that direction. Miranda, what should I say? Sometimes I feel sort of that, the sins of my forefathers are weighing down on me. My grandparents were missionaries in India. My father was a missionary, but then worked with the Lutheran World Federation and WCC right at the time when you were, when that whole sort of WCC effort to sort of push and embarrass the DRC was happening. And I think your analysis is spot on. What I would encourage you to do, if and when you want to pursue this in terms of a master's or a PhD degree, is to go to Geneva, Switzerland. The Centre Ecumenique has this wonderful archive where both Lutheran World Federation and WCC materials are there. And there are just absolutely reams of this stuff. Because what they were doing is they were asking their sister churches from South Africa. Desmond Tutu would sort of, when he was able to slip out of South Africa, would often come there with basically suitcases full of material about what the DRC and what apartheid was doing to the African churches. So I think there's an enormous amount of work that you can do there. But let me just put a conclusion on this so that we can go eat. I think I'm just absolutely thrilled with what all 5 of you have done, because to an extent, I think you are engaging with this international or global humanitarian effort, understanding many of the pitfalls that it has engaged in, and are sort of putting yourself in a position so that in your own calling, your own vocation, wherever that leads you, you might be able to assist those and serve those wisely. And for that, I really do commend you. So thank you very much.